Imagine buying a car today and finding out it's worthless tomorrow. That's exactly what's happening across Europe. These 7 brands are on life support in Europe, and no one's telling you the full story. Their sales are crashing, dealers are disappearing, and some have already stopped launching new models. If you're planning to buy one, you need to see this first. Starting at number 7, we have Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi used to be a name Europeans respected. It was tough, reliable, and had a strong rally heritage. For years, the brand had loyal fans across the continent. In 2019, things still looked good. Mitsubishi sold around 171,000 cars in Europe, but by 2022, that number crashed to just 55,000. That's not a dip, it's a free fall. Then came the real shock in October 2024. Mitsubishi didn't say it was leaving Europe, but they didn't have to. They announced a freeze on new models. No fresh cars, no future plans, just silence. Their CEO called it a strategy of selection and concentration, which really meant, goodbye Europe, we're focusing on Asia and Africa instead. Why did it fall apart? One big reason is the lineup. Mitsubishi doesn't offer much anymore. Just a few models like the Outlander plug-in hybrid, the Eclipse Cross, and the smaller ASX. Most of them feel old and outdated, and with Europe's tough emissions rules, old tech just doesn't survive. Mitsubishi never brought serious electric cars to Europe. While other brands moved forward, Mitsubishi stood still. And being part of the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance didn't help much. Inside the group, Europe isn't a priority for them. They've made that clear. Money is another problem. In early 2020, Mitsubishi reported a global loss of £1.29 billion in just one quarter. That's massive. Since then, they've been cutting costs and pulling back in many markets. Europe just didn't make the cut. So what does this mean for current Mitsubishi owners? For now, they're not abandoned. Dealers still exist, and after-sales service still continues, but that won't last forever. If new stock stops coming in, car values could drop. Fewer dealers will stay open. Parts might get harder to find. Even repairs could become a challenge in the long run. Mitsubishi hasn't officially said it's leaving, but the signs are everywhere. No new cars, no updates, no investments, just a slow fade into the background. Next to number 6, we have Lancia. Lancia was once a proud Italian brand with a rich history, but today it's barely hanging on. Right now, it only sells one model, the Ypsilon. It's a small city car and mostly sold in Italy. That's a long fall from the days when Lancia made rally legends and stylish sedans. In late 2023, Stellantis tried to bring the brand back to life. They launched a new Ypsilon, this time with hybrid and electric options, but the comeback didn't go as planned. Sales were dismal. In the first 2 months of 2025, Lancia sold just 2,195 cars across Europe, the UK, and EFTA. That's a 73% drop compared to the same time in 2024. One of the problems is price. The new hybrid Ypsilon starts above €24,000. The fully electric version, over €30,000. That's a lot for a city car, especially when you can get similar models from Peugeot or Opel, both owned by Stellantis too. In other words, Lancia is competing against its own family and losing. There was talk of expanding dealerships and giving the brand a push, but with only one model in the lineup, it's hard to build momentum. Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares recently had to calm fears by saying all 14 Stellantis brands, including Lancia, are funded through 2026. That's a polite way of saying we're not killing it yet. But it's also clear that Lancia isn't thriving. It feels more like a patient in intensive care, kept alive for now but with no clear future. For people thinking about buying an Ypsilon, this uncertainty carries real risk. If Lancia is shut down after 2026, resale value could collapse. The car already sits in a niche market. If the brand disappears, parts and service will be a headache. Common parts might be picked up by Fiat or Opel service centers, but anything unique to Lancia? That could vanish. So Lancia buyers today are making a bet. They're trusting that Stellantis keeps its promise for 2 more years. After that, nothing is guaranteed. For now, Lancia remains on life support. Moving on to number 5, we have DS Automobiles. DS Automobiles was born in Paris with big dreams. It split from Citroën in 2015 and tried to take on the likes of BMW and Audi. The idea was to offer French luxury with style and tech, but from the start, something just didn't click with European buyers. By 2024, things were already looking grim. DS sold only about 37,500 cars across Europe. That was a sharp 22% drop compared to 2021. And it didn't stop there. The early months of 2025 were even worse. In just January and February, DS sold around 5,060 cars, a staggering 30% drop from the same period the year before. That's not a slip, that's a nosedive. To put it in perspective, even Lancia, another struggling brand, sold 32,650 cars in those same 2 months. DS was supposed to be the future of French luxury, yet it's barely holding on. It's now even smaller than brands like Infiniti, which quit Europe back in 2019. So what went wrong? The DS lineup, DS3 Crossback, DS4, and DS7 hasn't changed much in years. The designs look nice, the interiors are well finished, and the tech is fine. But outside of France, hardly anyone feels any connection to the brand. There's no prestige, no pull, and no sense of why anyone should pick DS over Audi or Mercedes. The electric push hasn't helped much either. DS promised a move towards full electrification, but that plan hit a wall. Part of the problem is its parent company, Stellantis. DS still relies heavily on an old Peugeot and Citroën platforms. There's nothing truly special under the surface, and that shows. Even worse, Stellantis' own leadership has said it clearly. Any brand that doesn't make money could be axed, and analysts are already pointing at DS and Lancia as brands on life support. That's not just a warning, that's a flashing red light. For those who already drive a DS, the outlook is shaky. Sure, many parts are shared with Peugeot and Citroën, so repairs won't be too hard, but resale value? That's a different story. Once a brand fades from showrooms, used buyers get nervous, and luxury car buyers especially want names they can trust. DS just doesn't have that reputation anymore. If DS goes, Stellantis might fold its service into the broader PSA network. That means you'll still get your car fixed, but not at a sleek upscale showroom. The luxury treatment could vanish, leaving you with a brand that barely exists. So here's the truth. DS is shrinking fast. It's unknown in most markets. It's losing its edge, and the company that owns it won't hesitate to cut it loose. Then came the Alfa Romeo at number 4. Alfa Romeo used to be one of the most exciting car names in the world. Sleek, fast, Italian. But today, it's struggling to survive. In 2024, global sales dropped by around 19%, and in Europe, the numbers weren't any better, maybe even worse. Fewer people are buying Alfas, and it's starting to show. Right now, Alfa's lineup is small. There's the Giulia sedan, the Stelvio SUV, and the Tonale crossover. That's it. All three came up between 2016 and 2022, and there's no small city car or hatchback to attract younger drivers or everyday buyers. Alfa promised it would become an electric-only brand in 2027, but even that plan is falling apart. The company started cutting trim levels and pushing out hybrids instead. A full EV might still come, but it's not guaranteed. Alfa belongs to Stellantis, the group that owns Fiat, Jeep, and Peugeot. Inside Stellantis, Alfa hasn't been hitting profit targets. In fact, CEO Carlos Tavares warned that if things don't turn around, Alfa, and even Maserati, might be sold or shut down. And it's not an empty threat. Stellantis has been cutting costs across all brands. The future isn't looking stable. The problem goes beyond just new sales. Alfa cars have never held their value well, and if the brand disappears, resale values could crash even harder. If you own a Giulia or Stelvio, it might become harder to sell. New buyers might want to avoid Alfa altogether, thinking it's a dying brand. Servicing could also become a headache. Alfa parts are already a bit rare in some areas. If the brand fades away, specialist garages will become even fewer. Parts might take longer to ship. The good news? Because Alfa shares some systems with Fiat and Jeep, their parts can still be found through those networks. But you'll likely wait longer and pay more. And number 3 is Jaguar. Jaguar was once the pride of British motoring. Sleek, fast and luxurious, it stood for tradition and sport. But things are changing, and fast. Now owned by Tata Motors, Jaguar is not updating its lineup. It's tearing everything down and starting over. The plan is simple but bold. No more petrol or diesel Jaguars. By 2025, Jaguar wants to sell only electric cars. Not just any electric cars, but very expensive ones. The current models like the F-Type, I-Pace and E-Pace are either being killed off or won't be updated. A concept called Type 00 is expected in 2026, and it's meant to show where Jaguar is heading next. Right now, Jaguar isn't selling much. In the 2025 financial year, Jaguar made up only 8% of Jaguar Land Rover's total car sales, then became a marketing disaster. The controversial ad campaign was slammed in the press. Some people even called it woke. It triggered backlash and sales took another hit. Critics joked that Jaguar would go bankrupt. Tata Motors pushed back, saying the brand isn't dying, it's just shifting. But this shift comes with a big risk. The next Jaguars will cost over £100,000. That means fewer people will be able to afford one. Jaguar will become more exclusive, more like a boutique brand than a mainstream choice. This is a problem for current owners. If Jaguar stops making petrol models, those cars could lose value. Why? Because the brand will no longer support that image. Servicing won't disappear overnight. JLR's dealer network is still solid, but many Jaguar-only showrooms might shut down. And in a few years, finding parts, especially rare ones, could get harder. Next at number 2 is Suzuki. Suzuki has always been known for its small, practical cars. In Europe, you'll still find models like the Swift, Ignis, Vitara, and S-Cross. These cars have a loyal following, especially among people who want something simple, affordable, and efficient. And so far, Suzuki hasn't made any official announcement about leaving Europe. But things haven't been smooth lately. Sales across Europe have been slowing down. Part of the problem is supply. Another part is timing. While the rest of the industry pushed ahead with electric vehicles, Suzuki hesitated. They focused on hybrids and waited. That strategy made sense a few years ago, but now the competition has changed, and it's coming fast from China. Cheap electric cars from Chinese brands are flooding the market. That's put pressure on smaller players like Suzuki. Back in 2021, Suzuki was already making cuts. The popular Jimny 4x4 was pulled off the market in Europe because it couldn't meet emissions rules. Then came delays in launching newer models. In 2024, their global CEO openly admitted that battery electric vehicle sales are starting to cool down in Europe. At the same time, he confirmed something even more worrying. Suzuki is scrapping some of its planned EVs. Instead of jumping into fully electric, Suzuki is now doubling down on hybrids and what they call niche tech. But this shift isn't without consequences. In the UK, for example, Suzuki plans to discontinue 4 petrol models by early 2024. That's a big move, especially for a brand that relies on volume from small internal combustion cars. So what does this mean if you already own a Suzuki, or if you're thinking of buying one? First, Suzuki isn't disappearing just yet. Their parent company in Japan is strong and reliable. Even if things shrink in Europe, support for parts and maintenance should still be there. Most Suzuki parts are shared across global models, which makes maintenance much easier. But resale is another story. Since Suzuki isn't a major player in Europe, people worry it might slowly fade. That fear affects second-hand prices. The good news is that Suzuki is still seen as a global brand, not some local startup that might vanish tomorrow. That recognition can help keep resale values from completely crashing. Still, there is a risk. If Suzuki can't keep up with electrification, especially under strict EU rules, they could lose more ground. Finally, at number 1 is Maserati. Maserati has always stood out. It's the kind of brand that feels expensive just to say out loud. The Trident badge, the racing history, the raw sound of its engines, everything screams luxury. But behind that glamour, something troubling is happening. In the first half of 2024, Maserati global sales were cut in half. Only around 6,500 units were sold worldwide. That's a huge drop. And worse, instead of making a profit, Maserati lost £82 million. For a brand that sells high-end, high-priced cars, that kind of loss is a big red flag. Stellantis, the company that owns Maserati, knows this. They've made it clear they're not giving up on the brand as yet. In fact, even Stellantis cuts other car brands from their lineup. They've gone out of their way to say Maserati is staying. They've said it publicly and directly. Maserati is safe, for now. But let's be honest, a company losing that much money on such low sales won't sit quietly forever. Stellantis' new leadership has already said they're not interested in keeping brands that bleed cash. And Maserati has come up more than once in those internal discussions, even if the public line is still supportive. There's another reason this matters. Maserati isn't just any car. It's not like dropping a hatchback from a budget brand. If Maserati were to disappear, it would send shockwaves through the ultra-luxury world. Owners would panic about servicing, spare parts, and resale values. The second-hand market would wobble, and dealers, already limited, would scramble. For now, nothing has collapsed. Stellantis is still holding the line, and Maserati is still making cars. but it's a fragile situation. With low volume, high costs, and increasing pressure to perform, Maserati is living life on the edge. It might not be leaving the market in 2025, but if the numbers don't change, that story could flip faster than anyone expects.